Hello and welcome to episode 106, 106 of Third and Wrong. I'm your co-host, Stephen Bolin, and I'm joined by Austin Diddly Dallin Dallalonga. I tried at the nickname, man. It's not my strong suit. You're the strong one on that point.
I'm glad you heard those. Those were pretty good. That was
awesome.
That was the high of that episode. Everything else was downhill.
Just a touch of honey. Hey, you guys did a good job, man. Just a touch of honey. Foth is not joining us, but you have Bolin here to fill the void. So, Auzzie, it's kind of been a weird offseason since that first wave of free agency. There's been some lulls, and then there's been blockbusters like the trades we discussed last week with the 49ers, Dolphins, and Eagles. And there's another lull for about a week. And then just yesterday, I guess that would have been Monday for those that are listening, news broke that the New York Jets have traded Sam Darnold, 2018 third overall pick, to the Carolina Panthers for a sixth in 2021, sixth round pick, and a second round pick and a fourth round pick in 2022. So we'll get to what that all means in a sec. But Auzzie, I want to know your instant reaction to how this is. And then, how those thoughts have marinated. Has your initial reaction been different than how you feel about it now?
No, I still feel very strongly about this trade, actually. And the Panthers were in a very tough position. Like, they were obviously trying to upgrade at quarterback in some way, shape, or form. They were all in on Deshaun Watson before all the sexual assault allegations came out. And so with the Deshaun Watson trade at that time, this obviously being way before the sexual assault allegations and the lawsuits, they were we were discussing this before, like, you'd have to give up full drafts to grab a guy in his prime at Deshaun Watson's skill level. And the Panthers it sounded like they were one of the teams that were really in on him, possibly ready to trade a ton of draft capital for their upgrade at quarterback. I really love this trade because even though it's no Deshaun Watson and he might not even be playing anymore, Sam Darnold is still only 23 years old. He's got NFL experience. He was with the worst team over the last 3 years. And that jump from first to second year was decent. It was still under Adam Gase, so there's still that caveat. But he's still only 23 years old. And now you pair him up with a guy like Matt Rhule, where last year, Steve, you and I were talking about how Matt Rhule was able to turn around programs after a single year. He did that consistently, like I think 3 times.
Yeah.
Which is just incredible. So I think that, and Joe Brady, who's a quarterback guru apparently, and just everybody's got a thing for this Joe Brady guy. So
he's getting head coaching looks.
Name is Brady. Yeah. So
yeah.
Everybody loves it for this pairing of it was something last year with Teddy Bridgwater and Joe Brady. He's just apparently runs a very quarterback friendly offense, a West Coast style system. So now you get Sam Darnold and this really young team. Matt Rhule, I think him and I can't remember their GM for the life of me right now, but I'll look it up.
David Tepper, I want to say.
That's their owner. Close.
Oh, damn it.
Yeah. He's signing the checks at least. So you got that.
It's close.
But they drafted really well last year. They've got a really good young team. Get in Sam Darnold, who's still only 23 years old. And I think that he's still got untapped potential for sure. And for a 6th round pick this year, a 2nd round pick next year, and a 4th round pick next year, where is the risk? I feel like those are draft picks that you don't always hit on anyways. And for them to be in this position, they've got such a young team. See what you can get out of a young quarterback like Darnold. They've got the skill position players in Christian McCaffrey, Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore. They've got a decent offensive line. They've kind of retooled there this past offseason. I don't see a problem with this at all. I think it's a really good trade for a team that has a lot of uncertainty at quarterback and was in a very awkward spot sitting at number 8.
So their GM is Scott Fitterer, Fitterer. So pronounce that how you will. Obviously, I'm not one for good pronunciations. I now learned that it's Sewell, not Sewell, like I was saying last week for
oh no,
it's Sewell. So, hey, what are you going to do? But okay, so I see what you're saying, Auzzie, and I understand there's a lot of excitement. There's still upside to Darnold. He's 23. He's still younger than Joe Burrow, I think, and he's 2 draft classes ahead of Joe Burrow, where Joe Burrow was just 2020. where my issue is I think quarterbacks are very moved and swayed, and they're very dependent on their confidence, right? Like you get, and maybe it's like every position, and it's more sane in basketball too, but it's, he's playing unconscious right now, or he's in the zone, right? And there's these quarterbacks that when they get into it, they get into it. But when you rattle them, then all of a sudden, they're seeing ghosts, which I believe was a quote from Sam Darnold from 2 years ago when they played
against my Patriots,
the 2019 Patriots, and Belichick had him seeing ghosts out there. I am not naive enough to think that Darnold didn't have a great supporting cast there. He had one of the worst in the league. I mean, his weapons were Frank Gore, and I don't even know who they really had at receiver. They drafted Denzel Mims, but I mean, that's hard to, get production when, your O-line's still in tatters. So I understand that, but I think from this perspective is Darnold's now been in the league for 3 years, and it's going to take a lot to, I think, undo some of the bad habits he's likely picked up from being put through what he's had to go through, like being skittish in the pocket and, not trusting his receivers, not trusting his line, not trusting his coaching staff. And I think it's maybe a change of scenery. Like everyone just acts like he gets off the plane and suddenly everything's fixed. But I mean, habits take a long time to break. I mean, I still haven't broken the habit of eating dill pickle chips every week, right? Like that's just a bad habit that I've yet to break. And I'm not sure if I got traded to Carolina that I'd be breaking that habit. Not the same thing. But so where I'm coming from this at is I don't want to call Darnold damaged goods, but I think to a degree there is some fixing to do. And, that's like with any quarterback. Russell Wilson in 2017 played behind one of the worst O-lines, had no running game. And when Brian Schottenheimer came in, he had to help teach Russell Wilson how to step up in the pocket instead of doing that double rollout he does that would sometimes get him sacked for 15-yard losses. And so I think Joe Brady, being the quarterback guru we think he is, can help Darnold do that. But I think if I'm the Panthers, yes, it was kind of an awkward position at 8, but I think they still could have got Justin Fields, who appears to be falling, unless that's all smoke screens, or a Trey Lance, could have potentially fallen there and sat a year behind Teddy Bridgewater, who I've looked at all the stats. There hasn't been a single year since 2018 where Darnold's had a better rating than Teddy Bridgewater. I've compared all their seasons. I've combined 2 of Sam Darnold's best seasons to Teddy Bridgewater's. Like I tried to use most recent Teddy Bridgewater, like New Orleans on. And Teddy Bridgewater appears to be the same, if not the better quarterback than Sam Darnold. And I understand that the upside with Darnold is that a lot more with his age, and what we've already seen of Teddy Bridgewater is likely his peak. How do I put this? I'm uncomfortable with what the Panthers gave up versus what they could have just gotten in the draft, and the amount of correction that may have to take place with Darnold's game to really get him set on the right path, as he might be carrying over some bad habits from his days in New York. I don't hate the trade, but if I'm a Panthers fan, I'm still quite nervous because similar to the Eagles, you could be going into 2022 draft still looking for your franchise quarterback. Maybe the flip side of the coin is, Steven, they could be like the Washington football team right now, and you're going in with Fitzpatrick and Heineke, and maybe you're looking to draft Mills or Kellen Mond or one of those mid-round picks, and you don't know what's going to happen there. So I get maybe you're just trying to hedge your bets, but I'm lukewarm on this trade. I'd give it. I mean, the Jets got good value. I'd say I give the Jets an A-, but I give the Panthers probably a C+ on this one.
A C+, Steve. You're
a C+. I think what they're getting versus what the risk is, I'm not as high on this trade as many would probably predict.
Yeah, I wanted to caveat my excitement by saying I love the trade from a risk perspective because I felt like they didn't give up that much for what the potential could be with Sam Darnold. A 6th round pick this year, a 2nd next year, that's the highest that it can go. It's not like a Carson Wentz where it's a conditional. It's a 2nd round pick and a 4th round pick. Those are all picks that, like, the hit versus the actual, what am I trying to say? Those picks aren't, those are not gimmies, right? They're like, those are picks that are probably going to be guys who are free agents with more than likely, just based on history, they're more than likely to be free agents within a couple of years. What you could be getting from Sam Darnold is your franchise quarterback for that price. This doesn't close the door on them drafting a guy like Trey Lance or Justin Fields if he falls to them. That's why I really like this deal is you get Sam Darnold, sure, but you didn't pay a very high price for him. So if you do find yourself in the position where Justin Fields falls to 8 or Trey Lance falls to 8 and you really do want to take that quarterback of the future, you can still do that. You can still have a good backup in Sam Darnold. It's not going to hurt you. You paid a small price to pay for that guy, but with the potential that he could be your franchise quarterback. That is why I really like this deal. I feel like I'm on the same, I'm going to compare it to the Jimmy G contract that you and I debated.
Right.
What would that be, 3 years ago?
God. Well, we're only 2 years old, so it would have been 2 years this May that we debated that.
Right. So 2 years ago, we debated like the Jimmy G contract, and I mentioned it was a risk management type of deal. You signed the guy, but you front loaded the cash. But where it's kind of similar is that you're giving up a lot to some people. In the 49ers case, it was a lot of cash. In this case, it's 3 draft picks. But you get that security of having a potential franchise guy. You know how hard it is to get your franchise quarterback.
We don't know if he can be a franchise guy. And I mean, I guess we don't know if a drafted player can be a franchise guy, but I mean, we have 3 years. We have 3 years of case study on Darnold now, albeit with a very poor team, that he might be more prone to turnovers. My question is, why not keep the picks and roll the dice on one of these rookie quarterbacks and then just run it back with Teddy Bridgewater for a year? Because now if you go to cut Teddy Bridgewater, that's $20 million in dead money, and no other team's taking that on the chin in a trade. I've heard Denver rumored, but I'd much rather they draft a quarterback. I'm sure Tomac would too, than take on $20 million or $23 million of Teddy Bridgewater. And so I just think that's poor roster management in paying Teddy that much and then having that dead cap, because now you've traded resources, you're losing cap money. And I don't know what I think. If Fields is there at 8 or Lance is there at 8, I in my opinion, I think they'll look pretty stupid, but that's just me. What grade would you give them? I'm giving them a C+.
I would give them a B here for sure.
Just a solid B? Okay.
One above. C+, okay. That's almost disrespectful. This is more than a C. Anything in the C category to me is disrespectful at this point, because you get a 23-year-old quarterback. It's like drafting a good quarterback. Like, he's a good, if you looked at him as a prospect, he's got all the tools, as some people might say in the draft community. He's got all the tools. He's got all the tools. Seen what he can do. And it's been behind a bunch of trash. He's done not great, but he hasn't done, well, I mean, last year, I think he was one of the worst statistical quarterbacks, but you understand why he was that case, right? So
if the Panthers emailed me a heartfelt letter and me as the professor, I'd maybe consider giving him a B-, but that's contingent on the extracurricular work they do in the season with Sam Darnold performing, because right now I'm very nervous about what this means. But you know what? I think this is cool, because, you know, in this podcast, I find we all tend to agree with each other a lot because we kind of just share the same vision of roster building and team building. I'm just very nervous, especially like if the Panthers were drafting with the 18th pick, yeah, go get your guy, right? Like you're not getting one of these top 5 quarterbacks. But the fact that Justin Fields or Trey Lance could be sitting there and you're already paying Teddy Bridgewater this money and he's the perfect bridge quarterback, pun intended, I just find this move to be pretty irresponsible of cap and resource allocation. But I could be proven wrong. If Sam Darnold turns out to be a franchise guy and becomes a perennial 35 touchdown plus, maybe not even 35, a 30 touchdown plus kind of guy a year with 4,000 yards, keeps his picks around the low teens or single digits, you know what? I'll come on here and I'll paint my face Panther teal blue out of embarrassment. But until that happens, I think
let's go, Sam.
Yeah, I just think it's a very risky move in my opinion. Really quick from the Jets perspective, I think it makes sense. It looks like they're penciled in to take Zach Wilson. You avoid any kind of like Zach Wilson versus Sam Darnold quarterback competition, which I don't think Robert Saleh wants to deal with, or anyone in that organization for that matter. so they can go get their guy. And I know they wanted a second this year, but you end up getting a second and a fourth next year. And this isn't going to be a 1-year rebuild for this Jets team. So I like this from the Jets perspective. Like I said, I think I gave them an A- when I was speaking earlier. So I'm going to stick to that. I think they got as much value as they could.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. I think that you're right, because they are basically locked in to take a solid quarterback in Zach Wilson. It makes perfect sense. And you've already seen, it's weird because you have seen enough of Sam Darnold to kind of get an idea of if he's a guy that you want in your locker room. And I think that just the whole concept of a change of scenery is out there. I think it was perfect for them to move off of him, just because they do have this opportunity. He's due for an extension after this, or a possible extension after this year, Sam Darnold is. So you'd get yourself into a really weird spot by keeping him and adding a rookie quarterback in. So it'd just be, it's for the best. And you can always go get one of the guys off the street as your backup. I don't even know who they have as their backup.
The Jets, I have no idea. They used to be Joe Flacco, but he's in Philly now. And I think, one thing we have to mention on Darnold, they're going to pick up his option. So I think he's only going to get paid $4.8 million or something, or like that's his cap hit or something this year. And then next year, his 5th-year option is going to make him about worth $24.5 million, I think. So, or 22 million.
They did pick up his fifth
They're expected to. Maybe it's 18 million. There's so many numbers flying around nowadays, man. I just can't keep track of it all. But this really shapes up interesting for the draft, because now you have the Jaguars, Jets, and 49ers all guaranteed to be taking quarterbacks, presumably. Unless the Jaguars just go draft Kyle Pitts and have Gardner Minshew throwing to him, but which I don't think is the case. The Falcons at number 4, I think I mentioned this last week, intrigued the hell out of me, because now, like, if you're a quarterback hungry team, like, that's the team to trade with. I don't think the Bengals will move off 5 because they see, the Dolphins would be a threat to potentially take Sewell, not Sewell. And so I don't think the Bengals are going to move, but the Falcons could just be looking. They're locked into Matt Ryan. They restructured his contract. If they cut him next year, God, what was it? It was like $40 million in dead money or $20 million cap hit or something stupid. Like, they saved cap money this year, but they are handcuffed to him for 2 years. So it looks like they're sticking with him. I thought they were going to maybe take Justin Fields way before free agency. Not anymore. So now you have a team like the Lions, or maybe the Broncos, or maybe the Patriots, Auzzie, or maybe the Washington football team, or the Bears, all jockeying for that 4th spot. Because if it goes Lawrence, Wilson, and Mac Jones, now you have Fields or Trey Lance just sitting there right for the picking, and the Falcons can demand a heck of a lot if any of these teams deem him to be the franchise guy. So I'm really interested to see what the Falcons do with that, because they appear to be married to Matt Ryan for 2 more years.
Oh man, I would love to see, just because I think I'm falling victim to the hype, because 2 weeks ago I said that I wanted to see Cam Newton run this Patriots team, but I would not be opposed to the Patriots trading up to number 4, seeing as there could be a guy as talented as Justin Fields, or has the potential of a Trey Lance. Like, oh man, sign me up.
It's very exciting.
I don't know what the cost would be though. Like, the 49ers, I feel like overpaid, especially if they're going Mac Jones. Like, it's very, very interesting to me that you could maybe get a guy like Russell Wilson for just more than what the 49ers paid to get up to the 3rd overall pick. Like, isn't that kind of weird?
That is, yeah.
But either way, I feel like the Falcons can put themselves in a really good spot for, you think about how that could go if it is a similar price that they're asking for, 3 first-round picks. By the time Matt Ryan's deal is done, you've got ammunition to move up in the draft if you need to, or whatever the case may be.
Absolutely.
And so it puts them in a good spot. I'd be really, really pushing for it if I was Arthur Smith of the Falcons.
Oh yeah. Like, get us the hell out of here. We can't draft Kyle Pitts. Our offense doesn't need any more difference makers. We need offensive and defensive linemen.
Exactly. Oh God.
Let's shift gears to the CFL. And no, we're not going to be talking about the XFL. As far as it goes right now, we don't know anything. No one really knows anything. Unfortunately, we don't know anything more really in regards to the 2021 season. However, we thought it'd be kind of fun This Friday, I have an article coming out. It's ranking the head coach quarterback combinations in the CFL from 9 through 1. And essentially what I did is I went and looked at basically the head coach and the quarterback, how they match philosophy wise, what their previous resume, if there is one, indicates, and where I'd kind of stack them up. And so that's going to come up Friday, but we want to give you guys a sneak peek into that. So we're going to discuss some of my rankings here. And I guess where it was kind of bred from is like when Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll were bickering, I always thought that was one of the more like steady, solid combinations. Like you have Pete Carroll and you have Russell Wilson. That's a great head coach quarterback combination. Like Bill Belichick, Tom Brady in the day was a great quarterback combination. But sometimes you get combinations like, I don't know, John Fox and Peyton Manning. So you have a great quarterback and a mediocre coach. And so where does that fall in the ranking? So in terms of
Sam Darnold.
Yeah, exactly. So in the case here of the CFL, this was a very difficult ranking because I believe there are, I think only 1, 2, 3, 4 returning duos, 5, sorry. And then there's 4 new head coach / quarterback combinations. So this was really hard, Auzzie. I know you're not going to like what I have to say pretty quickly here.
I'm already shaking my head.
I know the list is on our docs here. So starting with number 9, I had Ryan Dinwiddie and Nick Arbuckle. This one, it pained me to put it here because the potential for this duo is so great. And I think I loved what Dinwiddie and Arbuckle did in their 7 games together in Calgary. And I loved what Dinwiddie did as the quarterback coach with Bo Levi Mitchell. Like his resume needs no explanation. I'm just very curious as to how this whole thing's going to mesh with the Argos and their additions. But even just centering it around Nick Arbuckle and Dinwiddie, Marshall Ferguson, who Matt Sentez pointed out has some great work, said that Arbuckle likes to take more of the short to medium throws compared to Bo Levi Mitchell, who took more deep shots. It was more kind of just more confident in taking those chances. So I'm really curious as to how this offense is going to look if Arbuckle still plays more conservatively. But basically what puts them in last here is just the lack of experience together and just what we don't know. We don't know what this team's going to look like. Or I shouldn't say lack of experience together. They have had time together, but we just don't know what this team's going to look like, honestly. And that's very concerning. So Auzzie, your initial thoughts on Dinwiddie and Arbuckle at number 9?
I think it's fair to say I might lean towards putting them a little bit higher than some of these guys because of the history of the 7 games together. Because I don't think Arbuckle went. No, he didn't go undefeated, but he did do pretty well, if I remember correctly. I can't remember
4 wins, 3 losses, and 7 starts.
And that doesn't sound the greatest off at first, but when you go back to those games, Arbuckle always kept them in those games. And one of those games happened to be the Montreal Alouettes comeback that we got to witness. And so that one, that's almost 5 wins. Like you could give it to him. So
almost 5-2. Yeah,
exactly. Almost 5-2. So yeah, I think that there's enough there that they could have maybe gone higher, but at the same time, to your point about the Argos in general, I think that does play a large factor here. They've signed every big name that they could possibly get their hands on. And how does that mesh? I have no idea. Has there even been word of a camp opening date or anything like that?
We have no idea. And that's the thing, like as much as I'll give Ryan Dinwiddie for being like a great X's and O's guy, and I'm sure he's going to be able to drop some really exciting offenses, we just simply don't know what he's going to be like as a culture builder. And we know how important developing that culture is. And now you're doing it with potentially no preseason or camp, with more new faces than I think there's ever been roster turnover wise in CFL history. So he has his work cut out for him. And I think that's what worries me the most about this, because he's going to have to focus on developing Arbuckle more, while also facilitating a positive culture in the Argos locker room. So Auzzie, number 8, and I didn't like this. I'm not even sure if I'm going to keep him here. I still have the rest of the week to work on this article, but I have Kahari Jones and Vernon Adams Jr. of the Montreal Alouettes. And don't get me wrong, the work these guys put in 2019 was incredible. They put Montreal back on the map. As Kelsey Fender said on here a couple episodes ago, Montreal was lost in the abyss post Calvillo. They tried Jonathan Crompton, Rakeem Cato, Kevin Glenn, Drew Willie, Darian Durant, Johnny Manziel, Antonio Pipkin all had their tries until Vernon Adams Jr. came into the fold, kind of by accident because Pipkin went down that week 1 against Edmonton in 2019. And, Adams Jr. went on a tear, 3,942 yards passing, 24 touchdowns, 63% completion, 400 yards on the ground, and 12 touchdowns to boot. But as I mentioned with Kelsey, those dropped and interceptable passes kind of worry me, and I worry about the consistency of this group going forward. I really like Kahari Jones as an offensive mind, and he's really great with quarterbacks. He played quarterback position mainly for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, if my memory serves. But I'm just really, and he's a great culture builder. Like, I think he's really turned around and fostered a positive environment there in Montreal. I just worry about Vernon Adams Jr.'s consistency going forward. And God, if he ever comes on the podcast, he's probably going to just destroy me just with a flamethrower. But I just worry about that because I just don't know, with those many kind of volatile throws, what's that look like this year, right? Like, what if half of those are interceptable passes and now all of a sudden your 10-8 record is 8-10, right? So I just worry about that. And we didn't get to see that step in development with the lost 2020 season. So that's where I stand with that. That's why they're number 8 for me. But I think there's the potential for growth, similar to Arbuckle and Dinwiddie, is enormous, right? By the end of this season, they could be number 3. So
Exactly.
Auzzie, how do you feel about that?
I don't love it when I'm just staring at it, but I get your point. One thing, I guess it's kind of like a two-edged sword because Vernon Adams did have those interceptable passes, and I recall very vividly always yelling at the TV, or even in the when we attended that game, I was yelling at him directly as to like, what are some of these throws that you're making? It's almost like right to the defender, and then they drop it, and it's like, okay, thank God. So I do get the point there. I just think that this duo is electric. And at the end of the day, I know that you can only put so much weight into quote unquote electric as far as the tandem goes. But I do think that the outlook for these guys should be a little bit higher, mainly because Vernon Adams, as you mentioned, he wasn't even supposed to be the starter that year. And the fact that he did as well as he did, including like having a suspended game in there, not being the starter for game 1, it was really fascinating to see how this guy went from bouncing around the league to all of a sudden being a starter and a franchise guy. And so I think that going forward, it's one of those things that I would have put them higher up, even just because of that history in year 1 for them. But I do get the downside there. Maybe I'm being a little bit optimistic that those interceptable passes are going to get fixed, but there's nothing that's suggesting that at this point.
Absolutely. And we just don't have the evidence. So I'm rooting for them. Don't get me wrong. This isn't me hating. I'm very nervous for that duo going forward because I want to see them succeed. Now, I can't believe Trevor Harris just decided, of all games, to have a record-breaking completion rate. He just decided the East semifinal would have been the time. So that was too bad.
That still pains me watching them complete basically every pass on my secondary.
But you've improved.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, no problem. The one that I really struggled with potentially moving Jones and Adams Jr. over was actually number 7, and this might surprise a lot of people. It's Rick Campbell and Mike Riley. Both have won a Grey Cup this past decade, but both are coming off their worst seasons in their respective professions. Rick Campbell was in charge of the Ottawa Red Blacks team that went 2-16, I believe, or 3-15, either or, take your pick. And Mike Riley coming off a season where they went 5-13, all that hype around the BC Lions, new uniforms, new helmets, new team, new coach. And he put up his statistically worst season too, his lowest touchdown total since 2015. And just battle behind a porous O-line. I believe they had one of the worst rushing attacks, and the Duron Carter experiment didn't work out. So I don't want to count out Mike Riley and Rick Campbell, but I just think the road forward and taking into account the pandemic and what that means for the season and the runway leading up to the season, whether you get a nice long training camp in preseason or whether it means you're playing a preseason game and then you're going into a bubble or whatever that looks like. I'm quite nervous Campbell's more of a defensive-minded coach. Riley's obviously all offense. But Campbell has worked with Henry Burris and Trevor Harris, not directly in the offense, but just on the team. There's upside to this combo, but I feel like at this point, it's not kind of like that young energy you see with Kahari Jones and Vernon Adams or Nick Arbuckle and Dinwiddie. It's kind of more of that, like, these guys are on their last leg and they need to prove something. So they're at number 7 more because of their legacy, but they're also this low because of the season that they're coming off of. And it just felt right to put them here. And it's weird because Mike Riley, I very often consider like almost like the Aaron Rodgers of the CFL, kind of has that same kind of gunslinger mentality. And I couldn't imagine putting Aaron Rodgers anywhere below 5th on any kind of list, but here I am doing it with probably the 2nd best quarterback or 3rd best quarterback in the CFL, Mike Riley. But that's where we are, and that's what the season they're coming off of. So, Auzzie, any thoughts on this one?
No, I wanted to say this would be a perfect opportunity for you to come out on the pod and say, you know what, I'm gonna switch 7 and 8 live on the pod. But then I did think about how just after 2018, we were talking about Mike Riley as the best quarterback in the CFL, and it was undoubtedly as the BC Lions were tooling up for a dream team type squad. And so there's all this. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why I have zero hope for I don't know. I was gonna say the Arbuckles, the Argonauts. But yeah, so no, I think that you're right that putting them here is kind of like an awkward fit because Mike Riley in any list should maybe be a little bit higher and maybe have the benefit of the doubt. But that last season was just, it was unlike anything that we could have expected from the best quarterback in the CFL at that time.
Yeah.
So to have this fall from grace, I think that there are some really good quarterbacks and head coaches ahead of them. I don't think that this is just a result of recency bias by any means. It's just, how can you go from here, and will the BC Lions have the tools to turn it around in such a way that gets them closer back to the top?
Absolutely. So fingers crossed, because that's again, it's just 2 wily veterans kind of looking to make a point. So we'll see what happens. Number 6, we have Jamie Elizondo and Trevor Harris of the Edmonton football team, or Edmonton Elk. We'll see. That's supposed to be announced mid-April. So Scott Milanovich's departure kind of left the team scrambling, and they landed on Elizondo, who twice tried to get a head coaching gig, I think once with the Riders and once with Edmonton, but was denied by both the Ottawa Red Blacks and his XFL team he was with at the time. So he comes from a wide array of experience. Maybe he's rooting for an XFL merger because he has some connections there now. But Elizondo was the offensive coordinator in Ottawa between 2016 and 2018, and that saw 4 receivers go for 1,000 yards. And in that time, Trevor Harris put up career highs for passing yards in 2018 with 5,116, and he threw a playoff record 6 touchdowns in the East Final that year. And so under Elizondo in total, Harris has put up 13,000 passing yards, 68 touchdowns, and had a completion percentage of 70. I think the resume they've put together here, it very much mirrors like Dinwiddie and Arbuckle, but there's just more to it. Trevor Harris obviously has a much bigger resume than Arbuckle. And so the only concern I have with Elizondo is he able to kind of establish that culture? I mean, this is an Edmonton team without an identity right now. This is a team that has lost their head coach who never coached a game. Scott Milanovich bailed on them for the NFL. So there's probably some hurt feelings there. So is he able to take control of that locker room right away and establish that kind of philosophy? He's going to be wearing a lot of hats. He's going to be the offensive coordinator, quarterback coach, and head coach. So he has a lot on his plate, but I think they're based on their previous work and the upside here. Trevor Harris is only in his early 30s. Elizondo is a first-time head coach. I'm really excited to see what this duo does. And I'm actually quite scared because now they have Darrell Walker back to go with Greg Ellingson. So that's why they're number 6, right in the middle. But God, these guys can explode, and I will not be surprised one bit.
Yeah, I think this is actually a really good spot for them because I was looking at the list and I thought that they maybe should have been higher. But at the same time, first-time head coach coming into a team where like there's been almost no activity, quite literally zero activity actually on the CFL front. So now you have to get this team cohesive. You got to get them meshing. And we saw how a first-time head coach in can't remember his name right now, but the head coach for the BC Lions, who was
Devon Claybrooks.
Yeah, he was put on a really good team, a really good roster, and it just went downhill. So I think that putting him right in the middle of the pack is actually a really good. It's a nice safe bet.
Yeah,
and I think that the history between Elizondo and Harris really does speak for itself. And I hope that Harris can kind of help foster that culture, because he has been so successful and he wants to continue to have that. Maybe he can help lead the team and get everybody on the same page in that sense. But first-time head coach in the CFL, there's not a good history suggesting that it will necessarily go well.
I remember when we interviewed Ricky Collins Jr. last year, and if you haven't checked out that interview, go do so. And when we asked him if Trevor Harris is elite, he laughed at us. He goes, "Of course he's elite." So with that kind of confidence and pairing up with his most successful offensive coordinator, I think we're in for a treat in that regard. So number 5, and again, I had to take my green goggles off for this one. I have Craig Dickinson and Cody Fajardo. 2 years ago, we had Chris Jones leaving Saskatchewan to take a position with the Cleveland Browns, which I believe he no longer has now. And we had Zach Collaros as our quarterback. And again, kind of similar to Montreal, game 1, Collaros goes down, Fajardo's in, and nothing's the same since. As far as Craig Dickinson's concerned, he's comes from a special teams background. So it's kind of cool. It's kind of like an all-encompassing view of the team. And obviously special teams is a third of the game. And so he understands the importance of that. And I think he's been really instrumental in building a great culture in Saskatchewan. Obviously, a lot of distrust coming off of the Chris Jones regime. I guess a lot of stories, just I've seen players talk on Twitter about like stories from 2016 and 17, his first couple of years there, and just a lot of Chris Jones was just a weird guy. That's all I really have for that one. So I think Craig Dickinson has really used kind of more of a teacher-student mentality and just really has fostered and nurtured a lot of relationships there, and players trust him. And then you add Cody Fajardo in, who's just been an absolute fantastic face of the franchise. And he has a lot to prove too. Now I'm not going to sit here. This is where I had to take off my green goggles. I mean, he kind of finds himself in a similar spot as Vernon Adams Jr., with just 1 year of good work to show for it. I'm not sure how many interceptable passes he's thrown. I don't know if that's been counted or if that was really
the green goggles.
No,
they conveniently came up.
I couldn't find that stat. But Fajardo in 2019, 4,302 yards passing, 18 touchdowns, I believe 8 interceptions, and then added 600 yards on the ground with 10 touchdowns. And he's only 28 or 29. So he doesn't have the wear and tear most other quarterbacks have at that age, because he spent most of his CFL career being a short yardage guy. And so he doesn't take in a lot of big hits. Just kind of put your head down, do the QB sneaks was the majority of his career up until 2019. And I think Dickinson and Fajardo laid a great foundation in 2019, making it to the West Final, was a goalpost short of making it to the Grey Cup their first year together. I think there's a lot to build on here. And I'm just really excited. Number 5 seems safe to me because it's not top 3 where it's like, okay, Steven, take off your fucking green goggles here. But it's also not disrespecting what they did in 2019, and that was get within yards of a Grey Cup appearance. So, Auzzie, bias aside, I know your girlfriend's a Riders fan, so maybe include a little bias in there to help me out. But how do you feel about Dickinson and Fajardo at number 5?
I actually don't mind this. It does cut a little bit in my heart to see Kahari Jones and Vernon Adams down at 8 when Craig Dickinson and Cody Fajardo are at 5. I think there's a safe argument to be had that Kahari Jones versus Craig Dickinson. I think that it's a toss up one way or the other. And then Vernon Adams Jr. and Cody Fajardo had very, very similar stats in terms of at least total touchdowns. And they're so close, but I do get like you're kind of taking into consideration the rest of the team as well to a certain extent, and kind of how the transition has come into place. I don't mind it here. I think it's a nice safe spot. Nobody's gonna be like, wow, I can't believe he had Craig Dickinson and Cody Fajardo at 5. But the Alouettes fans still going to be a little salty that
Yeah.
Kahari Jones and Vernon Adams are at 8. But that's the last time I'll bring it up, I promise.
No matter what with this list, some fan base is going to be choked at me, right? Like I could have anyone at number 9, 8, and 7, and they're probably not going to be correct according to some. So this is just my opinion. I'm no expert. This is the amateur agency, but I've watched my fair share of games, and this is just kind of gut instinct of where I see this going.
This is a good thing about lists, and maybe we should have a amateur agency meeting at head office and like have everybody do lists, because it's going to create outrage, and outrage is what sells on media. So
there we go.
This is actually really good for us. So keep it up. I'm going to tell all of my Alouettes fans in Medicine Hat. None of them, because there's no one here. But I'll make sure I go on Twitter and tell everybody about this, and then it's just going to create outrage. Amateur agency will make it big time, and we'll expand our head office.
At least people will be getting mad at something that isn't the XFL or the Rock for once in the past month.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
ease off on the freaking Rock, eh?
Yeah.
CFL fans, like, come on, he's just trying to help the league out.
Just trying to, cut
his teeth in this league.
I don't know what his real intentions are.
Yeah, I don't know either. I just got off the phone with him, actually.
Yeah, he's all good.
He's got really good intentions.
Wants to preserve the Rouge. We're ready to rock and roll. So
seriously.
Oh
my God.
Okay, so number 4, we have Mike O'Shea and Zach Collaros. And this one I felt really iffy on, because I really wanted to put potentially Fajardo and Dickinson ahead of these guys. But I mean, these two just won the Grey Cup. And a lot of people point, oh, it was Andrew Harrison, that running game, or oh, it was Chris Streveler, who became like the coolest guy after that Grey Cup win with his fur jacket and cowboy hat and booze guzzling ways. But I think the stats don't back that up. And, another good resource that Matthew Sentes pointed out to us from our interview is Chris Clement. And he said the expected points added with Streveler was negative 0.10. And Collaros's EPA on passing was 0.18, so a difference of 0.28. And he said in his tweet, in scientific terms, that's known as a shitload. So, I mean, Collaros added immense value to this team. And I remember even watching the regular season game of the Bombers versus the Calgary Stampeders. And that play where Collaros looked like Russell Wilson, just winding back and forth and then throwing that back corner touchdown, I believe was Darvin Adams. I mean, that's what the Winnipeg offense was missing, man. They were missing a dynamic passer, and people only think of Collaros as kind of injury prone and stuff, but that's not fair to him. And they also think he's not a good passer because he's also been handcuffed in some pretty vanilla offenses. 2018 with Stephen McAdoo was probably one of the more run-centric heavy team or passing or run-centric teams in the league offensively. I believe we almost had like 2,000-yard rushers or something, and Collaros only that like 8 touchdown passes. That wasn't the game style they played. But Collaros can sling the rock, man, and he can make quick reads and he can throw into tight windows. And now you're partnering him with Mike O'Shea, who's been, I believe, the head coach of the Bombers since 2017. So, I mean, he's established the culture there. He doesn't have to worry about setting anything new up. They've retained most of their squad from the Grey Cup victory. And I believe they've blustered their offensive line, or if not, at worst case scenario, they've kept it all intact. So I see Collaros and I see this duo, and I think, you know what, like if Collaros even gets 75% close to what he was in 2015, which I know was a long time ago, but if he even maintains the level of play he played in that stretch for the Bombers in 2019, this is a dangerous ass duo. And when I say it out loud, I have no problem putting him at number 4 anymore.
Yeah, seriously. Like, this man just helped win a Grey Cup. Like, what else do you need to see? But yeah, I guess it's durability comes into question, of course, whenever you talk about somebody like that. But at the end of the day, like, he's coming off of literally the best way to end the season. And the way that he came in at the trade deadline and helps kind of really propel this team, and he helped reinvigorate this offense. Really, it was just incredible to watch firsthand. And like you said, you had mentioned that him dink and dunking around the, I guess that's not the phrase that I need to make.
Zipping, like, zapping, and
he was doing it all. He was dancing around the backfield, and then he finds whatever the wide receiver's name was. Yeah, Adams, that you had mentioned. And I totally forgot about that play until you brought it up. But I remember watching that with my dad, and I was like, bruh, Collaros is unreal. Like, what? And so it's just fascinating that he is kind of considered like almost an afterthought to a large extent, just because he's had a couple of years battered with injuries, but he's still really, really good. He can still play in this league for sure.
Absolutely. Number 3, we have Orlando Steinauer and Jeremiah Mazzoli / Dane Evans. So if you want to call it best trio. But Orlando Steinauer just came in and won Coach of the Year in 2019. And Jeremiah Mazzoli in 2018 was coming off one of his most successful seasons of 28 touchdowns, 5,000 yards passing, and nearly 500 yards on the ground. Unfortunately, tore his ACL in 2019. But, I mean, these guys posted 15 wins without Jeremiah Mazzoli. And now I imagine the team they have now, the culture Steinauer has established, along with a healthy Mazzoli who's had a full, you want to call it a year and a half, almost 2 years to recover from his ACL injury. I mean, these guys are going to come ready to play. And if Dane Evans has to come in again, then it's, coming off 21 touchdowns, 13 picks, and 3,700 yards passing. I think no matter how you slice it and dice it, the culture and the defense that Steinauer runs to go along with the quality of passers Mazzoli and even Evans is, there's not much more explanation needed, in my opinion. I think these guys, although a disappointing showing in the Grey Cup, they showed a lot with how this duo. I think there's a lot of potential with what this duo can be, because we just haven't seen it full season yet.
Yeah, I think that you're right. And I was actually really pumped to see the Ticats stick with Mazzoli, even though Dane Evans did have a pretty good year under them. I think seeing what we saw from him in the Grey Cup was a good, maybe a good indication that you should stick with a guy like Mazzoli. And the Ticats have kind of been plagued in Grey Cups, it seems. But anyways, so having 2 good quarterbacks never hurt. And a guy like Mazzoli, where, again, another guy where heading into 2019, we were talking about him as potentially being one of the better, being up there with one of the best quarterbacks in the CFL. And unfortunately had that torn ACL early on, but he's still very much up there. And like you said, 2 years coming off of a ACL injury, he's going to be ready to go. And it'll be fun to see how he can improve from that 5,000 yard season.
Ooh, it's going to be nice. So this is probably my most controversial one, number 2. And I already know a lot of people are going to be kind of yipping at me about this one, but I just feel really strongly about this duo. And I really loved that this quarterback ended up in this city. And that's number 2. It's Paul LaPolice and Matt Nichols at the Ottawa Redblacks. And with all of the musical chairs of quarterbacks and coaches these last, year and a half, 2 years, LaPolice and Nichols instantly stabilized the 2 most important positions in football, and that's being the head coach and the quarterback for this franchise. I'm not too confident in what the remaining talent in Ottawa has to offer. I don't know, outside of Brad Sinopoli, what their receiving corps is looking like, what that defense is looking like, and even running back. I think there's Crockett, and I don't know many other names back there. Maybe, I don't know if Moses Madu is still there, but either way, Nichols with LaPolice as his offensive coordinator in 2019 before his injury, 1,936 yards, 15 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and led the Bombers to a 7-2 record before suffering his season-ending shoulder injury. And prior to that injury, Nichols said he felt the game slowing down for him. And I really think LaPolice is very creative in what he can do. I mean, we saw what he did with Collaros and Strevler and Andrew Harris and getting him involved in the passing game. And now you're going to have Matt Nichols, who, again, gets the injury-prone tag, but has now had a year to let his body rest and recover, going to come in and I really think take command of that team and that offense and instantly establish a culture going forward. And I know it's a first-year head coach like Steven, but the culture argument dropped those other guys back there. But I think LaPolice and Nichols having that prior experience and then coming to a team that was in disarray last year with, whatever happened with Rick Campbell and having Dominic Davis just throw a million picks, I think you're not going to have that problem. If there's one thing you can't fault Nichols for, it's being careless with the football. He takes extra care of the football, and I think that's going to be really important for this team going forward. And I just really like what this duo has to offer. I think the potential is there. I think Nichols isn't certainly young, but he still has a lot to prove. And I think he has a chip on his shoulder from how things transpired in Toronto for him and how his tenure in Winnipeg ended. So I like this duo. They have a lot to prove, and they're get a fresh start in Ottawa, and they're the number 2 combo for me in the CFL.
Yeah, I love this. I think that this will be really cool to see how that cohesion kind of comes to pass in Ottawa. And I keep wanting to say Toronto just
I
because
know
when we interviewed him, he was in Toronto.
right.
But yeah, this is going to be very interesting, and I can see myself lagging. So I'm just going to say, Steve, you hit the nail on the head, and I hope that my internet connection is still working.
You're still coming in loud and clear, my friend. So,
am I? Okay, good.
Yeah,
I saw myself slow down. I was like, oh God, here it comes.
You know what? I'll take your word for hitting the nail on the head, and we'll move to number 1. And by now, everyone should have a good idea of what that is. That's Dave Dickenson and Bo Levi Mitchell. These two have been working together since 2015 when Dickenson took over the reins as head coach. But he's worked with Bo Levi for longer than that. Bo Levi broke in the league in 2012, and Dickenson was his offensive coordinator. So they got the rapport. They got the Ian Rappaport. They got the rapport. Since then, they've appeared in 3 Grey Cups. They've won 1. They've never missed the playoffs and have never finished worse than second place in the West Division. Mitchell's won 2 Outstanding Player Awards in 2016 and 2018 and has been named a CFL West All-Star 3 times, 2015, 16, and 18, with Dickenson as his head coach. And he was the CFL passing touchdowns leader in 2016 and 2018. I mean, we talk about consistency. We talk about, and we've beat this to death on this podcast, and I probably have in articles too. The Stampeders get compared to the Patriots for their being the model of consistency in the CFL. The consistency predating Bo Levi and Dave Dickenson back to 2007 and 8. But now you have Bo Levi Mitchell choosing to stay in the CFL after his NFL options kind of evaporated with him not wanting to really have a clipboard role. And so now he can come here and just start padding his resume in the CFL, and Dickenson can do the same. And I think if they just stack a few more Grey Cups, we're going to see them head right to the Hall of Fame. They already have their spots reserved, in my opinion. And this is coming from a Rider fan. Like, I don't like saying this, but like, I have to be honest with what I'm seeing on my TV screen, what I'm seeing with the stats. And I think Bo Levi just came out on another podcast and said he wants to win like 5 more Grey Cups or something like that. So, and like, he's only 30, early 30s. I mean, we saw Henry Burris play till 40 something. So, I memean, this dude can be like, you want to liken the New England Patriots connection again. It could be like Tom Brady here, just going for the ring titles. He wants to pass for more yards. I think he wants to break Calvillo's record too, which is like at like 81,000 or something like that. So, I mean, I can't speak highly enough of these two guys. Kamar Jordan, who we had on episode 88, couldn't speak highly enough of that duo and the culture that's established there. It's one of the best well-run teams in the CFL, from drafting to how they spend their money in free agency to how they treat their players, all first class. And we never see like a 5-13 season out of these guys because they just they have the 2 most important positions in football filled. That's head coach and that's the quarterback position. I got nothing else to add on that, Auzzie. I think if anyone disputes this being the number 1 thing, they're just simply being biased haters at that point. And this is coming from a Rider fan. So
yeah, seriously, like I said, you hit the nail on the head on the other one. Like, what else could I add to this? They literally have done it all. And the only concern that one could have is that Bo Levi only played 11 games in 2019 with a shoulder injury, I believe, to his throwing arm too. So that is obviously a concern anytime, but it's now been coming on 2 years of recovery. So especially if he's coming on a podcast recently saying he's coming for Calvillo's 81,000 yards. This man's currently not even at 28,000. So he's got lots of football left in him by the sounds of it. And he really is he's just so good. Him and Dave Dickenson are just the perfect combination. Anytime you could be like you could be an amateur fan of the CFL and you could turn on a Stamps game and they'll always turn to Dave Dickenson. And he's one of those guys that he's just like, I don't even know where I was going with that, but I remember seeing this guy always on the freaking TV, and this guy's just always winning games. And I have no idea what what he does about it, but they are consistent, and I see myself lagging again, so I'm going to stop talking again because that worked last time.
All good. So I'm trying to map this out in my head. This episode, you'll probably be listening to this Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. It's going to be live as of Wednesday afternoon. So expect the article Friday morning. If I find we're already getting feedback on the quarterback and head coach rankings, might be release the article Thursday morning. But either way, stay tuned to our socials, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at The Amateur Agency for the article in full. If you thought we got deep explanations here, we got a little deeper in the article. So I'm really looking forward to releasing that. And please, if you disagree, comment. Let's chat about it. I love chatting CFL football, especially when it doesn't resolve around CBA agreements and potential mergers or the potential non-existence of CFL football. I just like chatting the Canadian game, and we all do. So we'll all kind of get in on this. I'm sure Auzzie will be yipping at me about the Kahari Jones, Vernon Adams Jr. Ranking. He's going to try to embarrass me on social media too, not only here on the pod. And so yeah, come chat with us, DM us. You know, you want to come at us publicly, do that too. Love the debate. And you know, we're here all for it. So while we're here, you can find me on Twitter at SteveBullen22. And you can find me on Instagram at SteveBullen_. And I'll be sure to check all the Amateur Agency socials as well at the Amateur Agency. Auzzie, where can the fine folks find you and come help you raise the Alouettes flag in defense of Jones and Adams?
Yeah, no doubt. I'm gonna have to start. I'm gonna have to get like an Alouettes protest or something at City Hall just to start recruiting. But you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at AustinPaul_. That's Austin with a Y, not an I. It's been over 2 years now, and I have not decided to change it. So we're just riding it out.
We're gonna ride it out, baby. We are who we are now. There's no changing. Forgot to say last week, happy Easter. So hope everyone had a good Easter, and wherever you're listening to this from, stay safe. We're hoping to have CFL and kind of normal life back again soon, but COVID is still a reality. So making sure you protect yourselves and listen to your local health authorities. Not me, but because I don't know what the hell I'm talking about when it comes to that. So good night, Godspeed, and thanks for coming out.